Ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode, we are joined by our good friend, YouTuber Matt Strykul of SB Fishing. And the reason we have Matt on is I think Matt might have had one of the most underrated YouTube videos of the year, highlighting a truly remarkable fish story that helps shed some light on something that's always been a bit of a mystery. Can a released tournament bass really find its way back home? And we attempt to answer that question and more on today's episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Welcome to the Tackle Talk podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tackle Talk. We have a very cool, eye-opening show for you today that I know you guys are going to love. But first, something else we all love, American Legacy Fishing. ALF has been the title sponsor of the Tackle Talk podcast for years because they're flat out my favorite place to shop for fishing gear. They've got an ever-expanding selection of rods, reels, baits, line, apparel, electronics, batteries, and more. They've got the internet's best selection of high-quality, lightly used rods and reels. They have an incredible loyalty program that gives you points back on every single order no matter what, or you can sign up for American Legacy Elite and actually get 10% back on every single order. No questions asked. You get exclusive deals and sales and free shipping with no minimums. So if you're tired of buying your tackle from some giant warehouse hundreds or thousands of miles away that takes forever to ship you your order and doesn't know you from Adam, check out American Legacy Fishing. You can either shop in person at their completely remodeled showroom in Evansville, Indiana, or you can shop online at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. And as always, you can use code TACKLETALK10 for 10% off almost all regularly priced items. Some exclusions apply, but not many. Almost everything is 10% off with code TACKLETALK10 over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. Okay, everybody, today we have a show that came to life one night as I got home from work really late at like midnight. I was sitting on my couch watching a couple YouTube videos before I went upstairs to bed, and I came across one of our friend Matt Strykul's YouTube videos titled, "I Caught the Lake Record Bass Again, and You Won't Believe Where." Now, to me, self-proclaimed fish nerd here, the part of that title that gets me is not lake record, it's one word, and it's again. Between that and the thumbnail showing Matt holding two fish with certain spots on the lateral line circled told me that Matt thinks he caught the exact same fish twice. And that interests me because we have the potential for some cold hard data on fish recapture, and that is right up my alley. I love trying to understand things that I don't already understand, and fish movement and tracking and their ability to navigate and sort of find their way home is a mystery in the fishing community that's not been fully unlocked yet. So I watched the video, I was glued to it the entire 12 minutes and 53 seconds, and then I immediately messaged Matt and I said, man, we've got to get you on to talk about this. And that's what we have today. So our schedule's finally lined up and we recorded this conversation about what I think is quite possibly the coolest video evidence and data that I've seen in a long time to help us better understand the movement of catch and release bass. Then, while we have Matt on the show, we also get to talk some cool new baits that I know Matt has been playing around with. I've seen his videos, but I've not got the chance to fish any of these yet. So I know Matt is a pretty truthful guy, so we sit him down and we talk about a few baits in particular to get his honest opinion on them. So we get into that in the later part of the episode as well. But I don't want to give too much of this episode away, especially the part discussing the YouTube video and the catch and release bass that he caught multiple times, because I want you to hear it straight from Matt for the first time. But rest assured, it is awesome. It is insanely interesting. And with that, we're going to hop right into our conversation with Matt Strykul of SB Fishing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined today by a gentleman we've had on one time before. It's been long overdue having you back on here. It's Matt Strykul, SB Fishing on YouTube, 163,000 subscribers, a true OG of the fishing YouTube game. So, Matt, thanks again for popping on again.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
So, first things first, like I said, it's been too long since we've had you on here. So, what have you been up to? Obviously, folks can check out your YouTube and stuff, but you've had just probably, 2.5 years since the last time we talked. So, what's been going on in the sort of SB fishing world? What have you been up to?
So, I guess since the last time I was on your podcast, I got a bigger boat. I started fishing more bigger derbies, hopped into some BFLs and some other local series that run on bigger lakes and rivers. So just getting my feet wet into that game and still fishing all the John boat stuff, of course. Like, that's what I love. I mean, that's just super fun. It's not too far from home, and I fish them with my brother. So, it's a good time to hang out. Besides that, just filming a bunch, making as much content as possible, and trying to catch some big ones, man.
And you do that, obviously. There's video evidence of all of that.
Yeah. Once in a while, I get lucky. I stumble upon a big one.
So you really have dove headfirst into a lot more of the tournament stuff lately, too. Is that something where you just have a natural attraction to that sort of thing and the competition of it? Or is it more, hey, this is also a really cool wrinkle for something else I love to do and kind of a livelihood here, which is the YouTube side of things?
I suppose both, actually. Like, I've always loved tournament fishing. That's like something I've done since I was a teenager, 15, 16 years ago. Growing up and like at the beginning of fishing, that was something I watched all the time. I watched Bassmasters and watched all of that stuff. I thought it was so freaking cool. Always wanted to do it. And then that's how I got started in the John boat derbies, and just kind of slowly worked my way up and got lucky, got the boat. And I'm still slowly trying to work my way up that ladder, man. I know it's just a series of things you have to do. There's steps. Like, you can't just jump headfirst into anything. And I'm trying to do it the right way and kind of go with BFLs for a couple of years, and then jump into some, maybe Toyotas and Opens, and next year or the year after. It's I guess if you look at it, it's all the same. Whether it's a John boat tournament or a bigger boat tournament, they have slight differences, but you have 8 hours, 9 hours to go out and fish and catch 5 or 6 for the John boat tournament series. But yeah.
Does your strategy change at all from a John boat tournament to more of a bigger boat tournament?
No, not really too much. I guess the one thing that I could say is different with the John boat tournaments is that I've fished out there so much. I probably have more experience on the Occoquan Reservoir than anywhere else. And being that I fish with my brother and he has the equal amount of experience out there, it just, we have so many places we've caught fish that it's okay, we'll try here. If this doesn't work, we'll go here. But most of the places that I've been fishing, as far as BFLs and some of the bigger events, I'm new, within the last year and a half. So my experience is very much dwindled. So a lot more pre-fishing going on there and trying to figure things out, and generally solo. So it's a little more difficult, but it's starting to come together. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. It's been a challenge, but in a good way.
Well, it's been fun to watch for us too. So keep it up on that front. But the main reason that I wanted to have you on today is, and we talked about this obviously through some messages and texts and stuff, was you had what I think is one of the coolest videos probably of the past year, 2 years. And I really think that people just, people like the fishing stuff. So, the tournament stuff and everything, people get gravitated toward that side of things. I think this is something that some people might have glossed over a little bit and definitely shouldn't have, because I think in terms of, if we want to get really nerdy here, and importance to us understanding fish, I know that's a broad thing and maybe a little bit of overreaction, but I think it's true. It's in terms of understanding what these fish are doing in the water, especially after you're taking them somewhere else to weigh in and letting them go. And we have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your grandparents or whatever saying what they think happens. But now that this is on video, you had a video that came out, this is probably 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was somewhat along the lines of like, I caught the same fish twice, you won't believe this story type of deal. And you go through and you watch this, and I'll just preface it really quickly, and then I'll obviously let you take the reins on this. But this was like April 10th, 2022, I think. You catch this giant fish in a tournament, lake record, almost 10 pounds, like literally a hair under 10 pounds. But then fast forward 14 months later, and you catch an eerily similar fish in an eerily similar spot. It's all on video. I'll let you take it from there, but I really think this is one of the coolest videos I've watched in probably a year or two.
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty shocking, to be honest. And so the first time we'll start with right when I caught it the first time. So April 10th, 2022, fishing a John boat tournament with my brother. And we got on a really good chatterbait bite. Water was like, you might have had 6 inches of clarity. It was up, it was dirty, it was cold, like just nasty, but they were biting. So we were running that, and I just caught one that was probably 6.5. And I'm like, well, I know what we're just going to be fishing these kind of like main lake laydowns leading up into these creeks the rest of the day. And we pulled up to this tree, and I made a cast across it. I'm like, feeling him eat it. Okay, he's got it, set the hook, pull it in. Didn't even know how big it was during the fight at all. My brother's like, oh, you think it's a keeper? I'm like, yeah, it's definitely a keeper, but I have no idea of its actual size. Like, I haven't seen it. It doesn't even feel that big. It's swimming towards the boat. It did boil on the surface, and I was like, okay, it's a good one. But it just flashed, and it was so dirty. Again, couldn't see anything. Fish comes straight into the net, luckily. I'm pulling it up and just boom, straight in the net, and we both are freaking out. We're like, oh my God, that's a freaking giant. Like, my personal best for sure. Prior to that, it was 8.88 pounds. I thought it was a 10. It was so close. Ended up weighing 985. So like tiptoeing on that edge, but absolute giant and lake record. So I guess when you convert it to pounds and ounces, it was 914. The previous lake record was 911. So I had it by 3 ounces or something like that. But released it I think it's like 4.2 miles away. Like I did the by the water,
like the Google Earth type of thing. I saw you trace the
exactly. Yeah, I like traced it out just to figure out like roughly how many miles it was. So it was, I guess if you think about it, it's not too far, but 4.2 miles or whatever from the exact tree that I caught it to the ramp that I released it. And yeah, biggest fish that had been caught in the lake. It was awesome. Great tournament. Fast forward the 14 or 16 months later, it's like midday in a tournament again. Weren't really catching much at all, and we pulled up on that tree, which at this point we're calling a big fish tree. And I told Ace, I was like, all right, I'm just going to rig something stupid up because we're not getting bit. Like, this water just looks perfect for a bubblegum Senko. I don't know why, but I'm going to do that. And I stuck like a small nail weight in the tail so I'd be able to sink it down, because the cool thing about that spot is that it's kind of a perfect spot for a fish to live. You've got the main lake, like a channel swings up against that bank, massive, massive, massive tree. Huge tree, really bushy, huge, long limbs. And it leads up to a point with like a small little cut that's full of wood too. And we're sitting out on the tree, and I'm just like flipping this Senko out into it and just slowly like pulling it through the branches. And I got bit the cast before. And I remember telling Ace, like, oh man, I just got bit on this stupid bubblegum Senko. I'm just going to keep throwing it. And like very next cast, drop it down, pulling it through the branches. It eats. I set the hook, and like immediately it's stuck. And I'm like, oh, come on, man, get out of there. Fighting him out. And again, comes right into the net. Like, so lucky. I don't know how a fish that big didn't just give me the business on like I'm fishing a 7-foot medium light or something. 8-pound test or 10-pound test in a Senko, but straight into the net. And as soon as it hits the bag, I'm like, again? Like, are you kidding me? like, this is the same. Like, I knew immediately it was the same fish. And I would say absolutely 100% is the same fish. Like, I went through, like, did a bunch of like very close up shots of all the pictures I had of them, tried to match up the lateral line, looked at its eyes, and a couple other small like identifiers on it. Its anal fin had like a small split in the middle of it, which was like almost a dead giveaway. And sometimes when you are holding that fish, like, you can't see it at all. But in other pictures where where it spreads a little bit, you're like, oh, that's it for sure. But 16 months later, after I'd caught it previously, when it was 985, we're into like June at this point when I caught it the second time, and it was 889, I believe. So it was just like a little less than a pound, and which was kind of the other giveaway for me.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Fish is post-spawn. Like, it has no eggs. It's probably been chilling a little bit. It's a little worn out from spawning. And, fish can gain like 10% of their mass roughly in that time. So it adds up. Like, I along with the markings, like just the way the fish looked and some of those identifiers, I was like, yeah, definitely feels the same.
Yeah, it's 1,000% the same fish. Like I said, before we start recording here, I like geeked out when I watched this video, and I screenshotted the video and imported it into Photoshop and stacked things. Like the two dead giveaways, one is the anal fin, because it's the exact same number of, I don't know, whatever you call them, like barbs back or whatever. Yeah. And then the other thing is there's a black dot above the lateral line that is clear as day in the exact same spot. And it's the exact same fish. Super cool to see. The other thing that you just glossed over there too, but it's true, 2 amazing net jobs. It's a trophy or something. The second one, especially the bubblegum Senko, goes flying out before the fish is within a foot of the net. Like, this fish just jumps up in the water, and it's like a butterfly net scoop in the air, and could have easily gone a very south direction pretty quick. So hats off to Ace. Yeah, 2 amazing net jobs.
It was funny too, because when that Senko went flying, he was like, dude, I thought that was all of it. Like, I thought the fish came unhooked right there. And luckily it didn't. But I mean, had that fish not landed in the net there, that's when it might have woken up. And I feel like both times that could have been the case. Like, it saw the boat and it really had some chances to have some power. Like, I could have absolutely lost that fish both times.
Well, yeah, at least the first time you're on whatever it was, like a medium heavy casting rod, right? You're throwing a chatterbait. And the second time you got a fairy wand. And you're like, all right, well.
Exactly. And in like probably the worst kind of scenario that you could have it, like, if that fish gained some traction right then, it would have not been fun. Like, it would have
a tree right below you.
And then I'm like, please, like, it's gonna get stuck, but like, please come out. There's no avoiding it getting stuck had Ace not had scooped it right then. So yeah, absolutely.
So the distance that this fish travels, just for folks at home that are keeping up with this story, this fish is caught, you weigh it in for the tournament, and then 14, 16 months later, you catch it on the exact same log 4 miles away. It makes it back to what we can call kind of its home base over 14 months, exact same log. Was there anything about that log that was distinct enough that you think, like, okay, it kind of makes sense this fish is just going to kind of keep swimming until it finds, I mean, if it's lived there for, if it's a 10-pound fish, whatever it is, I don't know, 15 years old or whatever it is, it's an old fish. So it's like, it's been on this log probably for a long, long time. It's very familiar with its surroundings. Were there other spots along this 4-mile journey where you would have said, there's plenty of logs, dude. You could have just picked any log. There's got to be some bigger picture here as to why it found that specific log.
There are about 1,000 other spots on the way down there that it could have stopped. I'm not kidding. Like, every single inch of this reservoir just looks fishy, and it makes sense why fish are where they are. But there's so many other options for that fish to be anywhere else.
Yeah.
It really does blow my mind that it literally swam all the way back there twice. Again, twice. That is something else we're going to have to talk about, because I know you just found out.
Yeah.
But for everyone listening, this fish in the last 2 months has been caught 2 more times in the tournament. series. Actually, the first time it wasn't. My buddies were pre-fishing when they caught it. And then 3 weeks ago, it was caught again. And I have a video and picture of it. It's the exact same fish. It's another identifier I don't really have much footage of because I was always holding the fish with its left side kind of facing a camera or video. It's got a dot like Dottie under its chin.
No.
Yes. Both of the last 2 times it's been caught, that dot's been documented. But I mean, you can still see like the slit in the anal fin. All the markings look the same. And like one of the other dead giveaways is just this fish's eyeballs. Like they are so big. They stick out.
They look like 50-cent pieces. Like they're huge.
3/4 of an inch. It's insane. But yeah, that fish. So that fish in the last 2 years has been caught 4 times.
All right, everybody. We'll get back to Matt in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Mossy Oak and Mossy Oak Fishing. And folks, one of my favorite pieces of gear over the past few months has definitely been my Mossy Oak tech shirts. We've had unseasonably warm temperatures lately, and these tech shirts are lightweight, they're cool, they've kept me protected from the sun, they're comfortable in the wind, and they just make those days on the water so much more enjoyable. And right now, those exact same long sleeve tech shirts are on sale starting at $17.99 over on the Mossy Oak website. So most other sites are going to have stuff like this for $30, $40, $50 a shirt, but right now over on the Mossy Oak website, they have a ton of patterns, all of them with that Hydroplex technology starting at $17.99. There's a reason you're going to see guys like Kevin Van Dam, Brandon Polinick, Greg Hackney, Hank Parker, Ott Defo, all of those guys wearing Mossy Oak fishing apparel out there on the water. When you're out in the elements, make sure it's Mossy Oak. So head over to www.store.mossyoak.com, click fishing at the top of the page, and check out their full line of tech shirts, hoodies, t-shirts, shorts, and more. Again, that's www.store.mossyoak.com. Okay, so here's the thing, because when I was watching the video the original time, like part of me was like, hats off to you, and part of me was like, oh no, because you put the coordinates on the video. Like, oh yeah, you drop the Google Map pin, you show exactly where this log is. Were those 2 people that caught the fish after you people you know and you're friends with, or were these people you heard through the grapevine that you think probably found it from the video?
No, they're buddies of mine. Well, okay. I'll say I just met the guy who caught it last. His name's Aiden Ford, and he just started fishing in the John Boat tournaments. Super nice kid. Super nice. But he caught it like another 1.5 miles or 2 miles down lake, across the lake.
What time of year did he catch it?
This was like 2 weeks ago.
Because that throws a wrench in one of the arguments that I always make sometimes, which is we catch, like, I have anecdotal evidence of this kind of stuff too, where we've caught the same fish, 2 years apart or 3 years apart or whatever. My thing that I keep coming back to that I see with this, and I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to it or if it's just, luck of what we're doing, but usually when I catch the same fish in the same area, it's the same time of year where I catch that fish in the same area. So I have this theory, we're river guys for the most part. So, these fish live between dam and dam, and that might be, I don't know, 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles, whatever it is that they have this area to kind of play with. And it seems like I'll catch the same fish, 2 falls apart, and it'll be in the exact same spot in the fall. But then someone will catch that fish in the spring, and that fish is 2 miles away in the spring. And so you kind of start to pattern, like you have this history with this fish, you kind of start to pattern these fish and say, okay, this fish moves to this area in the spring, falls back to this area in, the fall, and I don't really know where it is the rest of the time, but it seems like I can start to pattern its movements a little bit. The weird part about what you just said, though, is if he's catching it 2 miles away, it's like the same time that you caught it the first time. So you'd think it'd be back at the tree.
I know. I agree. So the third time that it was caught, it was my buddy Victor Deppy, who makes the Fish Everything glide baits. His buddy that was in his boat caught it. And this was, I want to say it was late March. They said the fish struggled a bit. They kept it alive well, tried to make sure it was okay. Again, struggled on the release, and they did everything they could. They were like, this, we got to take care of this. This thing's huge. They released it, swam away. They didn't see it pop up. They were like, okay, it should be fine. And clearly it was, because a month and a half later, this is the very end of April was our last tournament we had out there when it was caught. Aiden caught it like that mile and a half down lake. So yeah, I don't know. I watched one of Bass Fishing HQ did a good video on this. I'm sure you've seen it too.
Yep.
Yeah. They tagged all those fish and kind of tracked where they were. And they had the one fish that was like all the way in the back of the creek and it would go all the way out to the mouth during the spawn. Or sorry, vice versa. It would stay out on that main lake point and then go all the way back and then back out to the point. I'm thinking maybe it's so hard to say with this one because the only tracking route we really have on it is like, oh, I caught it and I took it 4 miles up to weigh in and it ended back up on the tree. Like maybe the spot that Aiden caught it in last is actually where it swims down to spawn because he caught it in like a real shallow, sandy, like mouth of a creek, which leads back into a perfect spawning flat.
Yep.
We have nothing else to go off of with that, obviously, because no one else has caught it. But still, I don't know.
Yeah, there's all the funky stuff where it's like the first time you caught it, it could have been 2 weeks pre-spawn. And it was just getting ready to go move up, that mile or whatever to go up to its spawning area before you plucked it off the tree and took it 4 miles and back. You know what I mean? So it's like, because all this stuff happens so fast because it's all water temperature based. It's all weather based. Like, you know how it is around here. I mean, from year to year, your spawn can be weeks and weeks off just because of one bad week of rain or one bad week of, a cold snap or something. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not out of the question. There's a very real chance that is its preferred spawning place, and most of the rest of the time of year it's just back there near that tree.
Yeah, I really think that tree is probably where it lives. And when he showed me the exact spot he caught it, I was like, do you care if I don't know him well, but I'm like, do you mind if I ask you where you caught it? I just think it's so cool. And he was like super down. He's like, dude, I'll show you exactly where I caught it. I pulled up Google Maps, like zoomed in. I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly where that is. Okay, cool. And he said it was also paired up with another fish because he scoped the fish and caught it on the fly. He was like, there was another one with it that was like the exact same size. So I'm sure it was just a giant male that it was paired up with, like getting ready to go up and do its thing. But these are things that like we can never really know, but we can try to put it together. And it makes so much sense that, okay, this tree might be its home base, but they still move around quite a bit. When you think about how far a mile is to a fish, it's like, yeah, that's a lot. But if you really think about it, that fish swam back to that spot twice. That's 4+ miles away. Yeah. No problem. And it ended up back on the exact same spot. How they find that is what really blows my mind. Like, how does it know to go down lake, first of all, when you have good deep water going? So that would be left from where I released it both times. Like, why wouldn't it go up to the right?
So is there any sort of current coming that way?
Barely. Like, there's a little bit.
You're really stretching to try and find a reason why it knows to head back up that way. The only thing I can think of is like, one, obviously we all know the deal with like salmon and stuff where they have the smell where it's like 1/1,000,000th of a particle. They can figure out, okay, that's where I need to go 17,000 bajillion miles this way to go back to my home, like creek or whatever. So I don't think everything that I've ever read and I've looked into, bass don't have that type of smell. They don't have that ability to triangulate areas that much. They can do it a little bit, but not on the level that salmon are. So I think that one's probably ruled out. I think the one thing I was curious about with your fish is there is this natural bottleneck of that skinny waterway there, where it's not like you're letting it go on a giant main lake and then it's just got Lake St. Clair out in front of it. And it's like, I would be really impressed you find your rock pile on Lake St. Clair, but at least there's a natural guiding of it because it's a skinny waterway. And it's just, if it picked that way to go left, which I don't know why it did that, but it did, there's only one direction it can keep going, and that's up that skinny little arm. The other thing would be like, if there is just something wired in their brain to find home. And I don't know what that is, but there's something where that fish has been alive for 10, 15 years. It knows what its, little cutout under the tree looks like. And even though it's stopping at all these, hundreds of trees along the way over 14 months, it's got plenty of time to find its way back. Where it's like, yeah, this is cool, but it's not quite my bed, right? Like, all right, I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to keep moseying on. And then finally it's like, there it is. There's my bed. I found it. So yeah, there's that. Or it's just pure coincidence, which I don't believe in because you have enough data on this one particular fish that's out of the equation at this point.
For sure. No, I agree 100%. I think there's definitely something like written into that fish and just fish in general where like they have a general area that they like. And I have no idea how they find it when you move them. But I think that probably a good portion of them do go back, like, or at least the biggest ones do. Like that fish didn't get that big by swimming around up shallow and getting caught a bunch. I mean, granted, it's getting caught a bunch now, but that's something else we'll talk about in a second. But it is insane that it's made its way back to that same spot 3 times now, or well, twice, and then caught a 3rd time and a 4th. But there's definitely something about that specific spot that fish likes. And to go 4 miles is just insane.
So this is maybe 2 years ago. We had on Zach Slagle, who was a researcher for the ODNR here in Ohio, and they did a study on Lake Erie on sort of, it's smallmouth and it's a bigger lake. It's a different setup, but the premise was the same. They were having these fish caught in tournaments. They were bringing them back to the ramp, and then they were tagging these fish and seeing where they go on the acoustic transmitters. And they have some data about where that fish was caught, right? They can talk to the guys at the ramp and say, oh, I was out at the Bass Islands or I was out at whatever, and okay. And they're watching where these fish go. And they just had, and he actually made a really cool, almost like a GIF of it, but it's a really long GIF where you can watch the fish disperse and you can watch over time. And it's a time lapse on how long it takes these fish to leave the harbor. And it was really cool because there are some fish that just jut out. They're like, get me out of here. I'm going back to Main Lake. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm getting the heck out of Dodge here and I'm going back out. And then others just kind of linger. And they're not lingering right around the ramp, but they're lingering in that bay for 4 days, a week and a half. And then they start to mosey on. But the one thing they found, almost none of those fish stayed in the bay. They didn't say, okay, I just got abducted by aliens. This is my new home now. They say, no, okay, I'm going back somewhere. Like I am traveling because I know this is not right, which I think is cool. A lot of times as kids, you're going out and you're like, all right, where are we fishing? We're fishing by the boat ramp because, 2 Tuesdays ago, they just let go 50 fish here. It's like those fish are long gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. For sure. It's a very neat thing that they did that. And I definitely am going to have you send me that. I would love to see.
It's cool.
I'm like, dude, I will absolutely nerd out on that stuff. I've always wanted the ability to track fish. Like, even if I could track 10 of them, be able to put in acoustic telemetry signal in them. Like,
just slap a Apple tag on it, just.
Yeah, it would be so cool just to see and follow them and kind of just figure out what they're doing and like what happens after you catch them. Do they go back to the same spot? Do they move along? Was this fish never really hanging out here? When you take them back to weigh in, well, they hang out for a while, like you said. You have some fish that'll hang out for 4 or 5 days and then they peace out.
You know what's wild? So you're kind of hinting at something here where, like now with forward facing and stuff, you're unlocking more of the mystery of what's below the water, but not on this front. You're unlocking more of the mystery about how that bass is responding to a lure, how that bass is responding to cover or relating to cover or being suspended at different times of year, all kinds of stuff. But in terms of following specific fish around and knowing where they go and their sort of nomadic patterns, we don't still know a whole lot of that. When I was down in Houston, this would have been January, I went down for that like Berkeley symposium thing they did down there. And they had like some researchers down there that were talking about some of the stuff they were doing. They had this kind of off the wall dude that was down there talking about they're using AI to track specific fish in waterways by their patterns. So AI can basically, they have like cameras in the water. They were doing it with trout, so it makes sense. Clear water, distinct markings, that kind of stuff. But they had these on steroids acoustic transmitters, more of like actual cameras, and fish would go by and it would scan that fish's, like in a bass, it would be like the lateral line. And every lateral line is like a fingerprint. It's totally different. And so if you've got that much data on it and that many pixels, well, you can identify that's fish number 43285. And when fish 43285 passes any of their cameras, it tracks it. And so it knows, oh, okay, it was just down here 2 weeks ago, and now it's up here. We just saw it go by the camera. That's super cool to me. I don't know the realisticness, if that's the word, of doing that on bass, because we're not in clear, beautiful streams. We're in dirty water. Like you said, there was 6 inches of visibility that day you caught that fish on a chatterbait. So it's not realistic, but something like that would be super cool. I think that's what you're going to have to do, because even the acoustic transmitters, it costs money. You got to put an acoustic transmitter every...
So much money.
And it's just you're praying that it gets close enough to that thing to ping it. It could be 6 inches outside the zone, and you never get any data on that fish. But that was one of the things where I was listening to this guy talk. I was like, it's a little off the wall, and I was like, but also super cool. If you can document each fish individually, where it almost has a fingerprint, and track where it's going, I think that would just be, like you said, I nerd out on this kind of stuff. So that's just, I dream that hopefully in 10 years, 15 years, we have that kind of data.
Absolutely. No, I think that's awesome too. That is, I have not heard of that. And that is very, very cool. And like you said, I think it would be very difficult to do with largemouth specifically, just because of where they live. And like, at least most of the waterways that I fish, like they just get way too dirty to even have a camera.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I can't imagine what else you could have to like ping and register, but
yeah, you almost need straight up GPS trackers on these fish, which is borderline impossible
underwater. Like it doesn't work underwater. I've looked into it. Like I've been trying to, or like I've always thought it would be so cool to have a video series on a body of water where you could track 10 fish or 15 fish. That was like small enough where you could go around the whole place in a day and do it once every 2 or 3 weeks,
just see where they're at.
Okay, this is fish number 1. This is fish number 5. Like, let's see which ones we can find today and see where they're at. It'd be so cool to be able to do that, but it's so impossible. Like, it's
there's a reason nobody's done it.
But it'd be cool. I mean, it'll probably be feasible one day somehow, maybe with AI and like some sort of super tracker. I don't know.
I really want to understand, because that is still the one complete mystery of fish, is their movement. And there's differences in subspecies too. It's like smallmouth are way more nomadic than largemouth. So the largemouth tracking might be pretty boring if that 10-pound fish has been sitting on that log for, 4 years until someone comes and plucks it along. Where smallmouth are a lot more migratory. They move around, especially in big lakes and stuff. But yeah, all of that kind of stuff. Even on like other species too. I would love to know how far a muskie is moving in some of our lakes. I know that some of them at least follow like white bass up the creek and stuff, but how many of them are doing that? And how much effort are they realistically willing to exert? We have an episode coming out, a week or two before this one will come out, where I just talked to a researcher with the Minnesota DNR, and he actually pumps muskie stomachs open and sees what they've been eating, and then makes all these diet studies and stuff. And like nice. Muskie, I've said the muskie chased the white bass back the creek because I see it every year. And he's basically saying muskie eat so many different things that and they're eating a lot of things that there's no other competition for. So like suckers. So yeah. On that type of thing, it's like, yeah, there might be a couple that are really back there pushing those white bass, but the heavy majority of that population is doing something completely different. They're just wandering around in the middle of the lake, there's a sucker, okay, boom. They're not these completely calculated creatures like sometimes we think they are. So yeah, all that stuff is just a giant rabbit hole I would love to dive down someday. I love that kind of stuff.
For sure. And with muskie being just the apex predator, I'm sure they eat a little bit of everything. Like they don't really care. Like, oh, there's something that looks about the size that I'm hungry for right now. I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah, he said that like most predatory fish, I'll have to go back and pull the quote, but it was something like this. It's like most predatory fish seem to key in on forage that's about 20% of their body length.
Wow.
So, which would kind of make sense, right? If you've got a 50-inch muskie, then it's keying in on a 10-inch something. That's not out of the realm of possibility. If you have a 20-inch, bass that's eating something 4 inches, that makes sense to me too. So 100%. That was kind of cool. And he's basically like, but then it goes way up from there. He's like, we've pumped muskie stomachs and they've had giant birds in them before. You have like anything and everything. He pumped one that had I'm going to get the number wrong, but it was something like a 28-inch pike.
Oh my God.
In its stomach. So like some of this kind of stuff is just the stuff I could sit here all day and listen to people smarter than me talk about the type of thing that it's just, we've always been on the boat. You're out there for 8 hours a day, just wondering, wishing you had that information.
Of course. still having, I guess, a bit of that mystery is what makes it so cool, though. Like, I love it. I love the difficulty of fishing sometimes, and like, I love a good challenge. That's what makes it fun, man.
I would agree with that. All right, everybody, we'll get back to Matt Strykul in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium Batteries. And over the past few weeks, you've heard me talk about it. I've been loading and unloading my gear and really taking a second to appreciate the abuse that I put my batteries through day in and day out. My batteries are not pretty. They're beat up. They're faded. They're dirty. They've got mud on them. In all honesty, they are probably abused more than batteries should be abused. But despite all of that torture that I put these things through, they still work just like the day they came out of the box. Batteries aren't made to be pretty. They're not made to sit up on a shelf. They are made to work. And every single time I load those batteries into my kayak, they flat out work. Any conditions, any situations when I need power, I've got it with Dakota Lithium. That's because Dakota Lithium batteries are twice the power of traditional batteries at half the weight. They charge up to 5 times faster. They last up to 4 times longer. They have a 100% US-based customer support system, and they come with a whopping 11-year warranty. And you don't have to pay full price because you listen to Tackle Talk. We're here to save you 10% by using code Tackle Talk 10. Use that code on your next battery purchase over at www.dakotalithium.com. Code Tackle Talk 10, the official lithium battery of Bassmaster. Well, the next thing I wanted to pick your brain about here, the past, couple months, maybe a year or so, you've had some videos come out where you've got your hands on some baits that I have some genuine curiosity about. Some of them a little out of my price range. Some of them I just hadn't had a chance to pick up yet. But you've had a couple videos that I want to ask you about. The first is a bait that I can't bring myself to buy yet, but it's definitely intriguing enough that I thought about it, is the Gomexis Cyber Bait. So this is a bait that is a full metal, like CNC'd, I believe, single jointed glide bait, right? And you got your hands on one pretty recently. Can you tell me about that bait a little bit, just in terms of like craftsmanship, how you like it? And then I know you went out and fished it too. Is it something that you see staying around, or is it more of a gimmick bait where you're like, okay, cool idea, but needs some refinement?
No, I can absolutely see this staying around, and I can see it being made in different sizes and shapes and like trying to mimic different kinds of fish. And I think it is absolutely pretty awesome. The thing is kind of insane. Like when you first get it, you're like, geez, this is kind of wild. Like it looks perfect. I mean, it's CNC'd, so, you know, it's basically blueprinted all the way through. Like it's perfect. It's put together by probably 12 or 15 tiny screws on one side. And it's got this one single little hinge. It comes with 3 different tails. It has a lip slot, a couple of really good hooks, and it's a bigger bait. It's 9.5 inches, but it looks very graceful coming through the water. Like it's one of those baits where when you're throwing it around, you're like, oh yeah, something will definitely eat this. I will say one of the issues I had throwing it was literally just the raw metal CNC, like you're throwing a metal bait. It's straight chrome. I personally never throw like a chrome bait.
You're like a bone guy.
Yes. I mean, I throw bone 95% of the time. I'm not even huge on color, but there was something about the chrome that threw me off. And then I started really thinking about it. I'm like, well, this looks more like a real shad than a bone glide does. So I just talked myself out of worrying about it and then started catching fish.
How does it respond compared to resin?
I would say pretty similar, to be honest with you. And I was surprised how buoyant the bait was. Like getting this thing to sink is actually really, really hard. Like you'd have to add a decent amount of weight to it, or like some really big hooks. The hooks that come with it are super sharp. Like they seem strong, but they're, I would say, like mid to lighter wired trebles, so they're not going to add a ton of weight, which is going to sink that glide. And that's honestly how I fish a lot of mine. Like I love using my glide bait on live scope and like sinking it down into brush piles and like letting it work its way down a big lay down into deep water where I can see fish. And you have to have something generally in the watercolor that I'm fishing that is going to get down within 4 to 5 feet of those fish. You know, if you're in super clean water, sure. Like I don't care if it's 10 or 15 feet above them. Like I want them to come up to look at it. But in most cases, I need to sync my glides. So this one, I was like, I'm going to have to add a lot of weight to this. You can add, so it comes with a lip. It's similar. Well, let me stop myself for a second. It is similar to like a Clash where you can add the lip in.
It's like modular.
Yeah, it's a modular bait. So you can add the lip, add different tails. And one thing that is different and that is so neat to me is that it has an adjustable hinge. So you press this hinge in and it has 3 different settings. Like it'll extend it all the way, which allows that tail to go like beyond 90 degrees, truly. And then medium setting is kind of, halfway. And then the shortest setting is just like it barely moves. And that's going to give you like the widest glide. And then all the way down to 90 degrees is just going to give you the choppiest, like it's coming right at you, like boom, boom, boom. And again, with the lip, I really don't fish crankdowns too much. I did mess around with it a little bit, but crankdowns aren't something I have a ton of experience with. So I just said, screw it. I'm just going to throw it as a glide, which is what I know. And I caught him. Like I did catch him, and I moved so many fish, and just the overall like design of the bait is super cool. And I still don't have a ton of experience with it right now. Like I need to put more time in with it, but I would recommend it for its price. Like, especially if you want to fish something, like if you want to fish docks or something where you're a little worried about throwing a $180 bait, like trying to skip it to the back, or like just get it in those spots where you're like, I'm just going to beat the shit out of this thing. If it hits it once, like I know it's going to explode. That bait is a very good choice for that.
Yeah, I think it's $129 probably retail.
$130.
Yeah. The one thing that was when I first saw it, like you get past the shock value of it being a CNC bait and that being new and cool. And that's the way a lot of things seem to be going nowadays. You got like baits, reels, and all kinds of stuff that, that CNC is kind of a technology that people are leaning in toward. But the adjustable hinge was the cool thing where I was like, I love it in theory. I'm curious to see how it performs, because all you ever hear about glide baits is like, it's got to be so fine tuned, and all these glide bait guys are so particular. And then the thought of just saying like, oh, just kidding, you can, doot, 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 and now it's a completely different glide. I'm sure there are glide bait guys that are like, I worked so hard to get it to work at just one of those pivot points, and this thing's going to work at all 3. But the other thing on that pivot point is like, you save money, because there are people that will buy multiple glides and they Dremel out one of them. They don't Dremel out the other one so that one has wider turns, one has, like you said, more crisp back and forth action, and having the ability to have one glide do all 3 is pretty darn cool.
I can go grab it if you want. I'll show you. Give me 1 minute.
2 hours later.
All right. I'm back. Sorry. I actually just got a new one. They just sent me this new one. This is the case that it comes in. Pretty sweet. But one other thing that I played around with quite a bit was the different tails that it comes with too. So they come in 3 different thicknesses there. I don't know how well you can see it. So the one on the bait is super thin, like maybe 2 millimeters. Super, super thin and like very pliable. And that creates 0 drag for the bait as it's coming through. Then you have the medium size one, which is probably 4 millimeters. And then the big boy, which is like 5 or 6.
That's crazy. I'm assuming a lot of people use the bigger, fatter one when you've got the lip in, right?
I would assume so. Yeah. I tried all of them with the lip just to like see what it looked like and played around with it as a crankdown. Again, I'm not much of a crankdown fisherman, but I wanted to see what it looked like. And it did look really, really good. But let's talk about this joint. This is like probably the coolest thing on this bait. So right there on the bottom, this little button, basically. So it's pushed in all the way right now. So you press it and then it extends out, and it like allows it to really.
Oh yeah, that's super wide.
Yeah. So basically when it's coming back to you and all the inputs coming from the line ties, so it's like telling it to go left and right, and that tail's kicking a little bit too, but it's coming back like just crazy S's, like straight to you. But then when it's pushed in all the way, it has a really wide, like natural glide going left and right. It looks awesome. Almost like a 250.
Yeah.
To be honest. Like that's what it really looks like when it's pushed in all the way.
That's like one of the things, if people are listening to this, like glide baits that people are getting into now, like the new Spro KGB. If you look at the difference between, so I've got like a KGB from Kevin, so like an actual resin KGB, and then I've got the Spro. Look at the difference in the tail on those two baits. Very different. The Spro goes almost twice what the regular KGB does. And people, when you're first getting into glide baits, do not underestimate how differently that makes that bait perform, because those two, yes, they're both great. One's got a different price point. They've got the same name and everything. Those two baits perform very differently. So different.
And actually, I'll be honest, this bait really opened my eyes to that, and to be able to adjust that hinge and like, how much is this even moving? Like a quarter of an inch. I mean, yes, it does give the tail quite a bit more range, but
yeah, but it's enough to go from like whatever it was, 20 degrees to 80 degrees almost right there.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, the amount of glide you get when this thing is pushed in all the way, like when you get it dialed and like you're comfortable with it and it's swimming back, like it has a probably 2.5 to 3 foot range of glide. Like my arms don't even fit in the screen enough to show you, but it's just so natural and it just looks good. Like I love it.
So how are you weighting that down? Are you a guy that pangs stuff on the hooks with you got like the, whatever you're doing, wrapping the little wire around the hooks? You use suspend strips, just different size hooks in general? So first I'll go with heavier gauged hooks. Like I'll throw a 3X Gamakatsu, like anchors, as
Jeff calls them. It's like, man, you got anchors on that bait. Yes, exactly. And then I'll, add suspend strips as well. And I will even wrap the hooks if I have to with just some wire or something to help sink it down. But I truly was surprised at how buoyant this bait is. When I first got it, I was like, this is going to be interesting just to see what it does.
Like, it's going to sink like a ton of bricks. It's metal.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
I was like,
nope.
It should sink for sure. Like, nope. I mean, this thing, as soon as it gets in the water, like it sits on top. Like, boop, it wants to come straight up, which is also cool too. If you like to fish a glide almost like a wake bait, I mean, or a surface glide, this thing is absolutely capable of that. And, as the water's warming up and as different lakes are coming up, when you get cleaner water, like I don't mind fishing a glide way up like that. So yeah, it's super versatile. I'll say that much. Like if you don't mind playing around with hooks or like weighting your glide a little bit and like playing around with the hinge, and if you like to fish a crank down, it's probably one of the most versatile glides that I've fished so far.
Well, there you go. Yeah, from someone that actually has one in their hand. I saw that, when it first came across my email or whatever, and I was like, no way. Like, I'm not falling for this. I'm not doing it. But is it hollow inside? Like, why do you think that thing's floating? The material it's made out of? Does it feel like it's solid, or does it have like chambers inside?
I want to say no, it's definitely like it has to have chambers inside. Like it has to be hollow.
There's no rattle or anything in there though, right? Like it's all silent.
No.
Okay.
It's completely silent. But it's definitely built out. No, it's a very, very cool bait. Definitely a path we haven't seen, and super cool. Like I'm excited to play around with it more.
All right, everybody, we'll get back to our episode here in just a second, but first, the Tackle Talk podcast is brought to you in part by RTIC Coolers. And this past week, it has been in the high 70s, in the mid to high 80s some days here in Ohio at the very beginning of May, which means we are in full warm swing mode, and summer is going to be here before you know it. And summer is officially cooler time, boys and girls. So when you're out on the boat, when you're on the kayak, when you're beating the bank, when you're wading, RTIC has the gear that you need to make spring and summer enjoyable, safe, and refreshing. If you need an ultra tough hard cooler, but you don't want to pay $10,000 for one of those name brands, RTIC has you covered. If you need a soft cooler for the kayak to pack your lunch or your drinks in or your snacks in, RTIC has you covered. Maybe you just need a new coffee mug for your morning commutes, or a travel tumbler to keep your hot drinks hot and your cold drinks cold all spring long. RTIC has you covered. So head over to www.rticoutdoors.com. Check out their brand new 22-quart ultralight coolers they just came out with. They have a brand new sage green collection just in time for spring. Again, that's www.rticoutdoors.com. outdoors.com. Keep the adventure going with RTIC. So speaking of another path that we haven't really seen too much, in a lure that, again, when I first saw it on my feed and I saw it in my email, I said, well, you know what? Hats off to someone that makes something that really turns heads and either builds a better mousetrap or looks like something I've never seen before. The Stealth Lures Stealth Rig. I think I saw a picture of you where you had one of those not too long ago too. Another one of those baits that just, I saw it, genuine curiosity of, I like the idea of improving on an Alabama rig. For those that don't know what it is, basically it's an Alabama rig style bait, but instead of having wires coming off of this umbrella rig, you have what I'm assuming are giant pieces of fluorocarbon, like big, tough fluoro or mono. I'm assuming they're fluoro. They're probably not mono, but whatever they are, they're clear plastic, malleable arms that are coming off of this thing. And you theoretically have a less visible, more durable Alabama rig. So have you got the chance to play around with that at all yet, and kind of initial thoughts there?
Yeah, I have. And I am very impressed. So I want to say it's like 200-pound monofilament arms. And I don't know what kind of, like, I'll call it heat shrink or something that he keeps on the mono for the blades. It's not heat shrink. Like, I've been trying to figure it out for a while. I have no idea what it is, but it's completely clear, and it keeps, that's what he uses to basically crimp the loop for the swivel to your hook, and in between the blades leading up to the giant clear head. But dude, it's an awesome bait. I've caught quite a few on it. Nothing like huge. And again, like I got it a little too late. Like I got it just outside of winter. So it just probably when I throw the A-rigs most, but I have been playing around with it more. And I think that it being clear definitely just, it draws more bites, man. Like, especially with how fish are getting keyed in on a normal A-rig now. And like, I think it comes down to like the vibration of the wire coming through the water and just seeing so many.
Is it lighter than a regular A-rig? Like, can you tell the difference? And just because there's different materials, it's not metal. The head looks like it's, I don't know what it is, some sort of clear plastic. So you've got weight reduction, I'm assuming. Yeah,
it's definitely lighter, but it's also, so they recommend to throw it with 1/8 ounce heads and like 3 to, I want to say 4.3 Kitex or any swim bait for that matter. So it's still got enough weight that you can throw it on your normal A-rig setup, and it's really cool. Like, I can't wait to play around with it more, especially even when the water warms up. Generally, that's when I will steer away from throwing A-rigs, just because you might have fish follow it or like zoom up to it and turn off, which beauty of forward-facing sonar. That's something I've learned so much, especially with A-rigs. Is like, yeah, sometimes you can catch them when it's hot, but I don't know. Like, they don't eat it as well when it's warm. But this one specifically being so different, and I was like wanting to be one of the first people to have it specifically for that reason. I am a big believer of finding a hot bait or something different that is similar and being the first person to throw it on a body of water, because the fish aren't used to it, and that could be the one that's going to pop off. So I was all about it. I had to try it. And I spoke with Saxton, the gentleman who makes it. He sent me one, and I've been trying my best to throw it as much as possible, and just haven't had enough time with it, but it is absolutely something different. And I do think it has its place, and I think it will absolutely outfish a normal A-rig. Like, no doubt in my mind. The bite is different. That is what I've been trying to. I've had a lot of fish, like, you have to really let them eat it. Like, I want to say because it's mono, like, you have to, it's different than the wire where you can just like feel that initial tap and just smack them.
Yeah, because there's tension on that wire all the time, right? So it's more sensitive, where you've got a lot more play in this type thing.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's something else I've been trying to learn a little bit too, is like, okay, you gotta let them chomp it a little bit before you swing on them. But it's a cool bait, and I think it's going to work through summer. Like, I can't wait till the fish get back offshore. And actually, I'm going to be throwing it tomorrow for sure, because I already know where I'm going to pre-fish tomorrow. Like, some of the fish a good amount of the fish are back offshore post-spawn chasing bait and shad spawns going on. So
I'm curious to see if it'll tangle at all. Like the one thing that I could see, I throw heavy, like you're fishing heavy current and stuff. Like I will throw an A-rig full of 3/16. I mean, I will throw heavy A-rigs. Even sometimes, maybe the two bottom ones I might go a quarter on. Sometimes I'm trying to get real deep on this type of thing. So the only thing I could see would be like the top, two arms or whatever coming and getting weighted down because you have too heavy of a jig head on it. And now you don't have these rigid arms that are keeping your top two up top, or depending on what state you live in. Right here, we can only have 3 hooks, so you don't have to worry about it too much anyway. But if you're a 5-hook state, I could see your 2 top hooks kind of intertwining a little bit if you got too heavy a jig head.
I honestly was very surprised. And granted, I have thrown it with 1/8 ounces like on the outside and then even up to 1/2 ounce in the middle. Very, very few tangles, like probably less than a normal A-rig. And I'm coming from throwing the tactical hog farmer rig. And that thing is great too. Like I'm a big fan of that, but I had to try this stealth rig and the tangles are just minimal, very minimal. Don't notice it anything more than a normal A-rig. And that was something I was very interested in myself, because when you think about mono or even any mono or fluoro, anything like that, you're like, how strong can it really be? Like when it smacks the water on an 80-foot cast or 100-foot cast. But I was pleasantly surprised, and talking with Saxton quite a bit and other people that have them, they're like, dude, I've caught like 50, 100 fish, 200 fish on this thing, and I'm still throwing it. And like, it's not broken yet. That's insane.
Well, and it's got to be easier to pack too. That's my other big thing about A-rigs that suck, is like once you have a fully rigged A-rig and it's spread out and you got your umbrella, you either have to crimp it all down to get it into something, or you just have this giant chandelier that's in the back of your kayak or your boat or whatever. Where with this, because it's flexible and it can do whatever it needs to do, it's got to be easier to store too.
That is one thing I will say that I'm trying to figure out. So they recommend that you hang it from that middle wire, so all the arms hang, right?
So it doesn't like crimp itself or something?
So if you leave it like on the deck of the boat with all of the rigs going to your reel or to a side, then like overnight or like over a few days, like, yes, it will naturally start to bend.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
But I will say, I mean, I've done it. I've left it in the rod locker for a week and pulled it out. Like, yeah, they're kind of hanging down, but you can kind of pull them back up and like slowly shape them back out into the shape that they need to be. And it seems perfectly fine. So I'm not 100% on that one yet. I need to experiment a little bit more, but if it continues to work the way that it has worked, as far as like being able to reshape it, it'd be great for storing, because I agree. Like, I hate having to take a wire A-rig. First of all, they're just so annoying to have on the deck. Like if you need to have one, you're like, okay, I need to have an A-rig on the deck today, but you're only throwing it in a few certain spots or like in these certain scenarios, and you're not hitting those a bunch. It's like, this thing is tangling all 5 of my other rods, and it's such a pain in the ass, and I've hooked myself twice. So, yeah.
I'm in a kayak most of the time too. So it's like I've got, off the back of me, right? You have this A-rig that's like right here on your shoulder in the back, and you lean back, too far one time, and you get a little jig head right here in your neck, and it's like, it's the worst. I will, if we're in the trust tree right now, do you know what brand I've been throwing for about the past year? I have to be prepared to lose my A-rigs because of how we fish in current and, deep smallmouth and stuff like that in the rivers. I don't think you listen to the show enough to know, so I will give you 3 guesses on where I've been buying my A-rig in the past, 2 years.
Do you want me to guess where, or like what A-rig is?
I'll give you a hint. Website.
A website? Like Alibaba?
Pretty dang close. Temu.
Oh, Temu, dang,
dude,
man.
$3 Alabama rigs, because the majority, if we're being honest, as long as you're not using it for multiple years or whatever, and you take care of it, your hooks on your jig heads are your most important thing. It's not necessarily the A-rig. So I've been buying 10 or 20 $2 A-rigs at a time and been stocking those. And then if you do lose it in the river or whatever, you don't throw up where you're like, okay, I just lost a $25 Alabama rig. But I've caught probably here's your shout out, China, I guess. I've probably caught, 30, 40 fish on those things before they start to go bad.
I believe it, man. It's wired.
Hilariously adequate.
And you can inspect this thing. What it should look like.
I switch out the snaps on some of them, right? You can open it up and look and be like, all right, well, 2 of these 4 snaps are shot already. I haven't even used it. Like, all right, switch the snaps out. It's a 2-cent fix instead of buying a $25 bait that I'm probably going to lose at the spillway. I'll buy a $2 bait I'm going to lose at the spillway.
I'm not hating on you at all. I think that's pretty fine, dude. You're talking about to me, the most important part is your jig head and your connection to the A-rig. You can look at the A-rig as if you're like, oh, this wire is wire. It seems fine. It's connected to everything fine. And it was $2, especially in those areas where you're saying you're fishing a river and you got current and gnarly rock or wood or whatever. I don't blame you at all.
Now I'll make you really cringe though, because my connection to my main line is usually a size 0 speed clip to the Alabama rig.
I like it. You live on the edge, man. I like it though. I'm all about it.
Okay, I have one final question here for you before we let you go. I know, obviously, we've kept you a while here. This is a question that someone wrote into our mailbag, and every once in a while, you do get these questions. You're like, you know what? I want to save this for somebody that probably has a better answer than I do or has a little bit more experience with it. This is one that came in probably 3 months ago at this point. So this is the Dakota Lithium mailbag question. You can use code TackleTalk10 at dakotalithium.com, 10% off. The question is from Cameron, and he says, can you rank your top 5 6+ inch glide baits? So I've only been fishing glide baits hard for about a year or two. So I have what I would probably call a top 5, but I think you've got a lot more experience than I do with them.
I don't know, man. I'll do it, but I will say, like we were talking about earlier, if I find something that works, I basically just stick with it. Besides this,
I'm the same way.
I've got 2 glides that I fish 90% of the time. But I'll just go ahead and knock them off. So number 1 for me would be a Fish Everything TS7. That's a Taxi Shad 7. Boom, you got one right there. Beautiful, brand new. That thing looks too clean, buddy. You got to throw that thing around.
I just got it used and very lightly used about 2 weeks ago. So I haven't got a chance to go out and throw it yet, but I'm excited for it.
That thing is beautiful. And honestly, the cool thing about those baits, the more beat up they get, the better they work. That's my favorite bait. It is something that just gets bit. You can catch 1 pound fish to however big they get in your water.
I like it. Rotating treble hooks, everything on it has a good range of motion. It looks like pretty quality. I like how skinny it is too. It's a very skinny, sleek glide bait.
Dude, it just works. And I've been throwing the same one, the bone one, for 2 years.
That thing's been chewed.
Unbelievably beat up. People would look at that and be like, oh my God, what are you doing?
There's something about just a chewed up, sun-baked, bone-colored glide bait. You get them in the mail when you first get a bone glide bait. You're like, I really need to get this thing painted because it kind of looks terrible. But once you let it out there in the elements, you let it sit out on the patio for a couple weeks in between trips and stuff and let it kind of get that cool sort of suntan going on it. They're so cool looking.
And that's exactly how mine is. It is a very off-white. We won't call it yellow, but it's getting close to it. But dude, I've caught so many fish and so many big ones on it. And I think there's something about that size where it's not too intimidating. They'll eat a fish that size all year long. And it's an easy bait to throw around, whether you want to skip it around docks or sink it down 20 feet into a brush pile to bring over a fish's head, or just sling it around the bank. You'll catch them on it. I guarantee it. It's also one that is very responsive to adding heavier hooks or just a little bit of weight around one of the hooks. You can play around with it a lot and make it do what you want. But that would be number 1 for me. Number 2, I would say, would be the 10-inch, the TS10, the Fish Everything as well. Just the larger size of that. It's literally the same thing, just a little bit bigger. Again, caught so many fish on it. And I am not even good enough to say like, oh, this is when I'll throw the big one. This is when I'll throw the smaller one. I will literally throw them both and see which one they eat. Whichever one they eat is the one I'll throw the rest of the day. But yeah, that both of those by far number one for me. I've caught the most fish on them. I have the most confidence in them. They're super like well put together baits for the price. I don't even want to say take care of it because I beat the shit out of most of everything I have.
That's what they're for. Yeah.
You fish it and you don't break it off somehow, it'll last you for years. It's a really good bait. Then we'll go with like a Depths 250. I've only caught one fish on one, but I just absolutely love it. I think it's one of the coolest baits ever made. Number 4, we'll go the old Go Mexis. That bad boy, just because of its innovation. I think it's really cool. You can do a lot of different things with it. And number 5. I don't even throw enough glide baits to think about another one that I have. What else do I have in the box? Okay, it's not over 6 inches, but I'm going to go with the Gracely baits, like the small bluegill that he makes.
Ooh.
That thing.
Yep.
Dude,
I've seen pictures of them.
it's awesome. I threw it for the first time. Like, he hooked me up with a couple. He was like, just throw them around, try them out. Like, okay. Went out on a local lake and was blowing pretty good. Was catching a couple shallow on, I wasn't even throwing glides or anything, but I was like, throw that little glide bait around. And I picked that thing up and I had probably a 20-pound bag in like 2 hours throwing it. And it just looks realistic. It's very easy to throw. You throw it on light gear. You know, he recommends throwing it on like 12-pound test. I was throwing it on 15.
I'd be a little nervous on 12.
Spinner bait setup. But yeah, man, I mean, it's got really light little crankbait hooks. I think they're like size 5 or 6, tiny. But it's a cool little glide. And especially coming into, like, at least here, later spring, early summer, a bluegill glide will like definitely get you some action. More action sometimes than your gizzard shad glide or just any shad glide for that matter.
That's what I need to get. I'm definitely, if I look at my glide bait setups right now, they're almost all shad profile. Like, I don't even know if I have a gill, which I need to get one because I think it'd be fun to play around with. Yeah, mine that I have like around here laying around, I've obviously got the taxi shad. I've got a Tato that I'm excited to throw this year too.
It looks real good.
Yeah, and then my absolute favorite for the past year or so has just been Kevin Brightwell's little 7-inch. He called them TSGs for a while, Chads, whatever you call them, but just textured. You know, those suckers are awesome. My only complaint with them is literally what's happening right now. My buddy does this too. We'll change the back hook out for one size smaller because that happens on almost every cast. Is you're going to get your back hook hung up in the tail. Real easy fix, but it's just one of those things that you definitely got to do.
I saw that he posted something on that.
Did he?
He did. I saw it on Universe maybe like a few weeks ago or a month ago.
Like explaining why it does it or a fix for it or?
No, that like it started happening and then they started catching more fish or something along those lines. We're going to have to... I'll have to
go back and look on that one. It's one of those things that just bugs me where it's like, oh my God, I got to pick this hook out every time.
I was like, oh, I saw a post on that. What I read was really cool, but I'm not recollecting all of it right now. But it was something that... Look into it.
Definitely look it up.
Universe, because I want to say it was Kevin himself that wrote in and was like, no, we saw it and tested it. Like, we went through it, but we were catching either more fish or like the hookups were no different. And it's cool. But I get the confidence side of it.
Yeah. It just looks not right.
Right.
Like, I got to fix that. And so that's what we'll do. We'll put a size or 2 smaller on the back, and then it physically can't reach the bottom of that brush tail, and it's never going to happen again. This is one I just haven't done that on yet.
Great looking bait.
Well, very cool, man. Hey, I appreciate you stopping by today. Again, awesome story on, your multiple giant fish catches, and something that I think people listening to this are going to absolutely love, because like I said, we all have that one friend that has one friend that has a story about this. But if you're listening to this, go to Matt's YouTube channel. It's SB Fishing, and then look up, it's about 3 months ago. The video is called I Caught the Lake Record Bass Again, and You Won't Believe Where. Go look that up and watch that and tell me if it's not one of the coolest things you've seen in the past couple years, and something that hopefully a lot of you listening are going to find as enjoyable as I did. But aside from that, thanks for running us down on the baits too. We appreciate it a ton. As always, fun talking to you, and we'll definitely be, keeping up with you as you're on your journey out there on the tournament side of things. Just as a reminder for folks, can you tell folks where they can keep up with you and everything you got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on YouTube, SB Fishing, Instagram, SB Fishing TV, I believe the handle still is. And those are basically my two main social medias. So find me there, posting videos at least once or twice a week. And if you need to reach out, hit me up on Instagram, probably the easiest way to contact me. But hope you guys come check it out.
Yeah, and it's good fishing content. Like, it's not gimmicky stuff. It's good old-fashioned, go out, watch Matt whoop fish, watch him go out and fish tournaments, get a look but you do. You get a look inside your thought process and everything, and nowadays where everybody's got their, thumbnails going to 12 different stores and spending $17, and how many fish can I catch out of my HOA pond with an oversaturated thumbnail? It's like, you've got good fishing content out there that I think I definitely enjoy. I've been watching, I don't know what it is now. I don't know how long you've been doing YouTube, but it feels like I've been watching you for 10 plus years at this point. So I think I told you one of the first reasons I went out to catch a muskie a long time ago was your series on trying to catch your first muskie. And that feels like it's been, 7-8 years ago at this point.
Long, dude. At least that long. Thank you so much for the kind words. It really means a lot to me.
Well, we appreciate you stopping by. Thank you very much, everybody. That is Matt Strykul, SB Fishing. Matt, thank you again.
Dude, it's been real.
All right, everybody. That is today's episode. I hope you found that conversation half as interesting as I did. Talk about some wild video evidence to show that a giant fish that was caught off of one particular log and then released over 4 miles away made it back to the exact same log to be caught again, showing that there's almost certainly something in a fish's brain that helps them find their way back to their home base. What that is, I don't know. But to me, reviewing the images, it is without a doubt the exact same fish, and there is absolutely no way that it's a coincidence in my eyes that this fish made it 4 miles back to the exact same log. So as always, we thank Matt for his time, for jumping on the show here, and we thank each and every one of you listening for tuning in as well. A quick reminder, there's still some Give 'em the Bean shirts left on the Tackle Talk website. You can go to www.tackletalkpodcast.com and click store. Thank you to everybody that's ordered one so far. They're starting to be seen out in the wild. I've got some pictures sent to me. Very cool. I appreciate you guys a ton. And while you're over on the website, leave us a mailbag question for your chance to be heard on an upcoming episode. We also just released a few YouTube videos on our YouTube channel with some interviews from the Bassmaster Classic from the folks at Daiwa, St. Croix, and Lewes. So go check those out over on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Tackle Talk Podcast, or you can just search Tackle Talk Podcast. It'll bring them right up. And we will see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2021. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.